Good evening. It's 6 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting of the Water Commission for Tuesday, July 21st to order. And I understand Commissioner Stone is not going to be here, and I think Commissioner Dorsey will be along here in a minute, but we have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and continue. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First citizens comment period. Do we have anybody that would like to speak or who has written into us? Okay, thank you. Item 4, business items. Minutes for the meeting of June 16th. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes provided in your packet? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
My question to approve June 16th, 2026 Water Commission regular meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Utility Department monthly activity report. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the month of June, we pumped 12.98 acre feet out of the Edwards and 51 for a year-to-date average of 51.52 with available remaining 480.51. Edwards Aquifer Authority is in stage 2 restrictions. We are in stage 2 restrictions. All distribution samples came back passed. We had a water loss of 4.8%. Had 309 work orders, 67 locates, no new meters installed, none replaced. Total portal customers 932 with a percentage of 98.09% for 1,678 assigned meters. No main breaks or leaks reported. Michelle has additional AMI meter updates to let you know about also.
Thank you. So during our past 2 billing cycles, we have noticed that the readability percentage had been going down and that we had more meters that we were actually having to send our crew out to read, do a drive-by read, which tells us that something's either wrong with the meter or something's wrong with the collector, which gathers the information into our billing system. So we sent the guys out, checked the meters, did our mitigation, figured out, that yes, the antennas were there, nothing was blocking them, there was, no issues that we could apparently see, at the meter. So we created a ticket with the Camstrup help desk to see if they can tell us, what was going on. Because May and June, we had over like 20 some meters that, we were having to read when typically we only have about 7, like 6 or 7. I mean, it's really low. And that basically tells you that, the readability is, really accurate. And, we usually have 99% of our meters reading or sending a read daily to the collector. So with the help desk, they were able to identify virtually or remotely through their system that there was damage to our collector, to the antenna. And it could have been caused by, a storm of some sort. And they were going to have to come out to investigate and then repair it. So it was an unexpected, repair that we came across. But I do have some pictures of what that looks like. It is on the elevated tower, which is up there, that photo. And if you see to the right, and then the next pictures that we have will show you where the antenna sits. Let's scroll down. That's the antenna and the collector. So it sends all the data to that tower, and then it goes to, the system, the Reedy Manager system, which gathers all of the reads, the meter data, and then we're able to pull it for our billing system. So they had to climb up the tower to let me see. I was trying to, oops, sorry. So yeah, that little piece there is where they had to come in and actually change out the cable and add some conduit to it to add more protection. The tower, I mean, the antenna is only warranted for like 2 years. So we did run out of our warranty, so we did have to pay, mega price, but, but it's fixed now and the meters are reading a lot better. We still have some that are, a little bit slow, to read, but we're working on that too. They're a fantastic team who helps us all the time, so we're happy that they were able to identify it for us.
Did you climb up there to take pictures?
I did not, and I did ask.
She wishes.
I did ask Marissa if I could climb, but no, I did not. So we're grateful for the police department actually sent up their their little drone, yes, to take pictures for us so we could send it to them. So yeah, that was not me up there.
Michelle, you also attended a Camstrup training session or seminar. If you could give some highlights of that.
Yes, Monica and I were privileged to be able to go together and attend the class for a couple of days. What Camstrup does is they put on a training session every year for municipalities or, just clients who are either looking at purchasing those type of meters and their software and everything. And of course, just their current clients. And they provide us with updates on their software, excuse me, and of course we get to ask, questions that, even other cities can ask questions about, like, well, how does your system work for you? What are you running into? What kind of, issues, which usually are very minimal because the technology is just very incredible. I mean, they are from Denmark, the manufacturer, and they have crews that come down too for the training that, explain everything, and they go through their whole history on, how they come about and such. But we go through, different little breakout sessions, and so you can pick, well, what do I really need from, this training session, and how can I help others, too. So over the past year, I was also selected as someone to be part of a pilot program for their new software that's rolling out here soon. It's going to replace the current one that we use, which is like a network-based program. It's going to be web-based now, and they did roll out, several different items that they've been working on over the past year. And because I was in attendance, they actually called out for City of Garden Ridge several times for me to raise my hand and to explain things, talk about the pilot program and what kind of testing I have, been able to do with it. And so that was kind of fun because they were always looking for me in the sessions. And so Monica got to really put together all the pieces of the puzzle from, seeing now what billing looks like for her and how we gather that information through the software, and, how important it is. Yes, how very important it is for us to always be on top of the readings and the leaks and, things like that. Because when the collector is down, we do not get notifications on leaks, during that period. So, we could have a massive leak somewhere and we don't know it. So it's very important. But this year also they introduced several new vendors, which, they're trying to collaborate with other teams like GIS mapping systems, AI software that is like a predictive, pipe and meter risks, what they see in your system, like what could be happening or what they'll see in the future. Preventive maintenance software. They also introduced some battery-powered actuators, which were really interesting to place in the ground for your valves to automatically or remotely cut those off using like SCADA, technology, which I thought was really interesting, that, you don't have to actually go out and dig up something and go turn off a valve or something. It would do it automatically for you. So they introduced a lot of new things that, could be incorporated in your municipality, for whatever your infrastructure has. So that was exciting. That was good.
Thank you, and thanks to the city for allowing the two of you to attend that. I mean, staying up to date on that is really important, particularly in the area of leak prevention and so on. Commissioners, questions for Stephen or Michelle or Monica? 4.8%, I gotta ask. Anything significant going on? Uh-huh.
Nothing really popped up as any leaks or anything, so could be something that just we haven't found yet.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, thank you. Item 3, items applicable to the Water Commission, discussed at City Council meeting. From the July 1st City Council meeting, the main thing that I picked up on is that the City Council held a public hearing on and then approved a public works specification manual. And any particular questions on that you can direct to Stephen or Ryan, but my understanding is that this has really been in the works for a couple of years and is quite a document, and have worked on it, and it's now approved, and it's another kind of anchor document for the city in terms of specifications for how work is done. Next item, item 4, wastewater ordinance. This is a revised draft that was given to you from our review on June 16th. Before we open it for comments and discussions, I've asked the city engineer, Hank Crippen, to maybe take us through at 2,000 feet with the red line changes and summarize what's been done, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Of course, thanks. Yeah, so since last meeting, we did our best to address all the comments that were provided during the meeting, and just some broad strokes. We clarified authority. We gave better definition on some items that were maybe a little unclear. We added a clarification on septic requirements and where to go to for those. We did remove the section that talked about the sewer rates. That's not part of this ordinance. And then we also included, rather than just referring to the CCMA industrial waste order, we did find a revised, updated version and just decided to attach it to this, so it's not just out there. Let's have all that information readily available and included on this so that they know what they're getting into from a industrial pre-treatment standpoint. So in your packets, yeah, you should have the red-lined version in there, as well as the attached industrial waste order from CCMA. Yeah, we can go, in depth on it, or I'll leave it to the commission on what you'd like to discuss.
Thank you, Hank.
Sorry, one more thing.
Yeah.
I did want to note that Marissa, the city secretary, did notice some formatting things that need to be adjusted, and she'll catch those at the end. So there's underlining of sections, making them uniform, maybe some capitalizations of city, and changing his to their, that type of thing. So she's already noted all of those and plans to make those revisions.
Okay. And my understanding from our conversation is that this has been reviewed with legal, and any comments they have are incorporated? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, comments? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I had one very minor one, and it relates to you just mentioned that the fees have been pulled out of this draft of the ordinance, but on page 6, where we incorporate the Cibolo Creek Municipal Authority Industrial Waste Order document, the bottom of that page, that document, in the very back, one of the last appendixes,
has a fee schedule in there. So I don't know, do we need to affirmatively carve out those fees, or, because we just incorporate this by reference, I would think that that appendix, and I'll see if I can find it here. Yeah, appendix B, sort of the next to last and last
Mhm.
page, has fees in there.
That's a good point. There may be their own fees for industrial
Right, that's what I
pretreatment, and so.
assumed it was their fees, but if we're gonna set our own fees, do we need to say in this section 5 here on page 6, except for appendix B in the attached document? Because I think where the intent is to incorporate this entire document by reference into our ordinance.
That's correct. So anybody that would be bringing on any sort of industrial style application that requires more treatment than a typical
Right.
wastewater retail user, then they would have to go through this individual permit process. And they would have their own set of inspections and monitoring and.
Oh,
and
I understand
use.
that, but I
Yeah.
mean, but we're saying Garden Ridge is gonna set its own fees for those activities.
Yep.
But that document has, I guess, Cibolo Creek's fees in it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll take a look at it and see if we just
Okay.
need to add something just to cover ourselves to make
Yeah,
sure that.
just say except for appendix B or something along those lines, just to
Sure.
make it clear that Garden Ridge is gonna have its own fee schedule.
Perfect.
I have a question about that. Wouldn't anyone that is in it says that it's gonna govern those customers within that service district, so those permits and those fees would apply to those customers, right, Hank?
On the spot, I couldn't give you an answer. I'd have to review. But we can look at it and see if those would still apply. If they do have their own fees that are applicable to them for pre-treatment reasons, then we would want to keep those fees in place because that's something that they would owe to CCMA.
Sure,
not to
so
us.
they may be in there and Garden Ridge have its own or on top of that, so,
Yeah.
okay.
I guess I'm not clear on what we're heading for here then. It basically would, I mean, we can't erase the fees that are set by the people that ultimately process the waste. We may have other fees in addition, so, with the goal of trying to get this through tonight, we probably ought to understand what direction this would take.
So this is their permit fee structure, should you have to go for an individual permit for pre-treatment.
For
And-
pre-
and
that's
that
what I
would be,
thought.
that would be specifically paid to CCMA and would be entirely detached from any sort of retail fee
Okay.
that Garden Ridge would have.
Okay.
So this current ordinance as it stands does not get into wastewater, Garden Ridge wastewater fees. The fee structure in the CCMA industrial waste order is specifically if they do have to go for an individual permit, then this is the fee structure they would owe to CCMA.
Right.
And so
Right.
that would still apply to
Oh,
them
okay.
in their specific instance. And these are not, this is an atypical industrial user, like a
Right.
poultry processing plant coming in.
No,
or something
okay,
like that.
understood. So what I'm hearing then is that those fees would apply in the event, and Garden Ridge may or may not have additional fees to go through that application process
It would.
as part of,
In that instance, they would be going in for a development permit, and we would review what usage they're wanting to do. We would notice that their proposed use is going to trigger some sort of pre-treatment, and then we would basically at that point just communicate with CCMA, and then CCMA would take over, and then they would follow all of this, and we would monitor, but it's mainly a agreement with CCMA that we would
Okay.
we would
All right.
monitor on the side.
okay,
So it's kind of its own independent
Sure,
setup thing.
okay, all right.
Okay. You okay with the wording as it is? Okay, all right. Okay, great. Commissioner Strickland? Okay. Dr. Carmichael?
Yeah, I still have some concerns. I want to make sure that on the section 1 where it says septic systems, and then later where it talks about, and I should have marked this better. It talks about, where does it talk about anyhow? Talks about exemptions. I want to make sure that it's clear that the purpose of the septic systems is for all the additions, the expansions that have been made within Garden Ridge, that they are captured, and they're captured for the future as well. That there is no grandfathering once this ordinance is issued, that's a state requirement, and if it wasn't met, and it's nowhere in our building permits as a requirement. So it kind of astounds me that it's a self-reporting requirement by the state, and if it hasn't been accomplished, I don't know who's been reviewing building permits for the city, but if it's a PE, then they should have caught that if it indeed needs to be addressed. So that's one thing that I want to make sure that it's clear that that's a state requirement, and it needs to, it doesn't get grandfathered by the issuance of a city ordinance, that it's still in effect. And then I had a lot of questions about some of the definitions, and COD we reference in here, but we don't define. But then when I finally went to the CIBELO and into their abbreviations and definitions, then they do define some of these. So I'm wondering if somehow we can bring the CIBELO general provisions forward a little bit so that they're addressed further up front, so I don't get most of the way through the document without finding different definitions and clarifications, but then I find it in here. So somehow, if I don't know how you bring it forward, but I'd like to see it referenced a little bit sooner. And that would take care of a lot of my comments and issues if I'd read this first, but I didn't. So one thing is, but we never define COD. We have exemptions in section 3, and I want to make sure that those exemptions are not interpreted to give exemptions to anyone who has expanded their footprint without addressing the septic. And I worry that if that happens, that who's going to pay for all the modifications to those existing septics? If we, the city, would be held accountable or up to criticism for not looking at that sooner. I got some things in here, and I'm sorry, I'll have to go through. You talk about wastewater samples and sampling, but nowhere does it talk about maintaining calibration of equipment. You talk about flow meters and running BODs and maybe even CODs, but there's nothing in here about maintaining equipment. Maybe backhanded or vague, but I'd like to see a little something about maintenance of equipment. And I don't know, some of this is a little vague. You have, and I'm jumping way forward here now. Where am I going? Compliance point user, 11, let me see, whoops. Yep, nope, that's not it. So I lost myself. Okay. On page 9, there's a list of items for, we're not supposed to dispose. You have whole blood. That's defined by the Texas Department of Health and Human Services, what constitutes whole blood. Slops, I don't know if that needs to be defined. Some of these could be worked out a little bit. Under requirements for traps, you have grease or waste containing excessive amounts. I don't know what an excessive amount is, and it could be in the Cibolo, but I didn't find it. And grease traps, I don't know if we can put anything in there, but if you've ever pumped a grease trap, it smells to high heaven, and it permeates and it goes all over the place. I don't know if there are any times that we can tell the pumpers to come out or not, but that's just kind of a personal thing. So, main thing is on the septic laws and state laws that it be clear that there's no exception for prior modifications, that is a state law and has to be followed. And you can't interpret the city ordinance to give you a grandfathered system or an exception. And it's COD. And again, if you could bring forward either the abbreviations or definitions in the Cibolo document, in this document somehow, it would have helped me to not be looking at minutia. I guess that's probably about it.
Okay. Thank you. Taking the issue of septic, every time it's referred to, it does say to the requirements of Comal County. And I'm not sure there's any grandfathering within the city of Garden Ridge because, Stephen, you probably can speak to this historically. Every septic system that's here meets Comal County requirements. I mean, they're the permitting authority for septic systems. I don't know that the city of Garden Ridge stipulates anything anyplace about that other than there's things about permeability and things like that. I guess I'm not sure. I'm questioning whether there's a problem out there because Comal County has always regulated septic systems.
Yeah, I talked to Comal County, and they only regulate those that are notified. If someone tells them they're
Okay.
modifying their septic.
In the permitting process,
For an expansion
for an
or,
expansion, there is a septic system, so that permit wouldn't be approved. I mean, I guess maybe my question is what's the controlling point? There's a building permit to expand a home. At what point is the septic system judged? Is that permit strictly within Garden Ridge, or does it involve Comal County? I mean, I understand your point. I don't personally think this is a huge issue, but we ought to deal with it now.
well, it is a state requirement, and it's delegated to the counties.
Okay.
And so the county has to, but the county only comes out and inspects if they're notified that there is a expansion or a building permit that will expand the septic or the requirements of the septic. And septics are based on number of toilets, number of sinks, showers, water usage,
right.
basically. And if they don't get notified, the county doesn't get notified, then there's no inspection.
Okay. Does the Public Works Specification Manual address this in any fashion?
I couldn't find it when I looked
Okay,
anywhere.
all right. I'm not sure this is the right document to address this. This document says septic systems. It doesn't, we're not in the business here of setting requirements for septic systems. We're saying septic systems are excluded for certain reasons, because there's so many of them here and they're functioning and they can continue to be used. I guess I'm wondering if there's some other avenue, if this is a concern that some other way it could be dealt with. I'm kind of looking at looking out at the city here. I mean, is this a problem? I mean, do we run into a situation where somebody, I mean, people can't do things without a permit. If they do, they may get away with it, they may not. But a permit also requires, if you're going to add, to get a permit approved, you have to have somebody say, your septic isn't big enough for that mother-in-law's quarters. I mean, to me, that's the
We have
the
third-party,
logical-
we have third-party plan review that does this for us.
Okay,
So they're the ones that's gonna review that again, and it's gonna be the responsibility for them to get a permit through the county because they enforce those from a septic system. I'm not sure, again, when you're talking about septic system related to the property that's being built, that's gonna be captured through our third-party plan review. They're gonna know exactly what we need to do from that standpoint. Hank, I don't know if you wanna elaborate on that, but again, the county is the mechanism for enforcement and in permitting for septic here.
and the county is looped in through that process.
Yes, they're looped in through that process.
Okay. I mean, if somebody goes around all the laws, they go around all the laws. They may get caught or they may not. You can build a swimming pool, you might not get caught, but, I mean, I don't know how, I don't know that we can address that here. Hank, any comments on that?
These, when you get into defining outside of your regulatory authority and trying to reference other things, you can sometimes dig yourself into a hole with referencing their requirements, because what if their requirements change? So it's kind of like a balancing act. How in-depth do you want to go? I mean, for example, if someone wants to take a pond off of their property, this isn't in here, but they may trigger some sort of federal requirement, and although they are violating federal law, they may not be violating city. So when you build these ordinances, do you go into the level of detail to say you need to make sure you're going to the feds for whatever it is per CFR, blah, blah, blah. So I guess it's really however in-depth you want to get, but you can, in a way, sometimes dig yourself into a hole having to update your ordinance when other aspects update. I don't know if that quite
Okay.
addressed your concern, but.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that the wording stand. I mean, I'm satisfied. I'll leave other commission members, and we can ultimately vote on this about that the permitting process, if it's initiated, covers this. I don't know how else to address that, Doctor, but this seems to lay aside, and we covered this in some earlier drafts, that septic systems need to be carved out, and the wording is there. Other comments, equipment calibration. Whoever runs the test has got to have calibrated equipment.
And
I mean,
if I may.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Miller did point out that the calibration is covered by 40 CFR section 136, which we call out in section 6.11. So it's covered by saying reference these standards for it.
Oh, that's in the Cibolo?
It's in our ordinance.
Sort of type of version.
Oh, okay, all right, good, okay. The third item that I noted was definitions. Your question, Doctor, is that we use wordings in our wastewater management, wastewater document that aren't defined, but they are defined in the Cibolo one.
Yeah, I just suggested that the Cibolo abbreviations and definitions, if they were brought forward in our document, it would make it clearer to me when I reviewed it, because I didn't,
Yeah.
I had a lot of comments about definitions until I read the Cibolo document,
Right.
and then it's like, oh, well, there it is.
Could we resolve this by adding something? This would be right at the suspended solids is the last one, is to add something that additional items herein are also defined in CCMA.
Was that the?
Just put it in by reference.
Yeah, just reference CCMA for further clarification or something of that nature.
It was defined by CCMA or City of
Yeah.
Cibolo? Cibolo Creek Municipal Authority?
Yes,
or
right.
City of
Just-
Cibolo?
Yeah, the ones in the document you provided, they're in here.
Yeah, I wouldn't, let's not restate them, but maybe
Right.
make a reference at the end of the definitions section, what, 2, that also refer to, something like also refer to definitions in the Cibolo document. I'll leave you to choose the appropriate wording, but, because those documents are kind of linked at the hip, you know, as it were. Okay. Good enough?
I have no other comments.
Okay.
I'm good.
I have just a couple. I have one that's more of a question. This is under 3.01, is when required. It talks about every residence or place of business or other building and so on. But the bulk of this ordinance deals with industrial, commercial applications. And it isn't so much I'm arguing for a change or anything, but what's the practical impact of this ordinance and CCMA on a resident? Or more likely, Garden Ridge puts up some high-density housing at some point and has a concentration of outfall. They, you know, they would be required to have a grinder system and produce effluent that would meet these requirements. Is that, they look just like if they were an industrial operation then?
So if I'm understanding you're asking if there's a high usage that comes in and has a high demand, when would this be triggered for them? Is that-
Yeah, a lot of this goes into, it makes reference to industrial commercial usage, you know, operation. But a multifamily residential unit that connects to this, they then by reference need to comply to all of this also. I mean, they're not a food processing, they're not an industry, they're not a plating operation. They're just a bunch of homes all joined together. I guess I'm asking, what's the, does this sufficiently cover any requirements for them? I mean, I think it covers a lot, but it's the only place in the whole thing, I think, that resident is mentioned. For example, I mean, a 20-unit building, that system would have a grinder pump at its master connection point before it would discharge into the Garden Ridge system. Is that, in essence, how something like that would work?
In the current system, the way it's set up, yes, if it's going into a forced system, they would be required to
Okay.
set up their own grinder.
Okay, I'm not trying to pick a hole, and I just, as I read it, I just was trying to understand it, because that's a possible outcome. Okay. All right.
Correct. If there was ever gravity option in the future, they may not have to
Right.
have a grinder in that setup. It doesn't get it quite into that detail on how
The
that's set.
requirements
That's more
for
of
that
a,
are, okay.
it's more of a, on a case-by-case basis, when the application comes in, how can we serve? And we would review their setup and make sure it works hydraulically and and approve that what they're doing, and their maintenance plan is up to a level of care that would be approvable.
Okay. Last comment I have is 3.03 notification, Public Works Director, and I think this came up in a prior meeting, shall be notified at least 72 hours. It was, is it a brick through the window, a phone call? I'd like to add some words, shall be notified in writing with acknowledgement, so that, it's pretty important, it's a notification prior to commencing work, that it's received in writing and that it's been acknowledged, so that there isn't, well, I sent you a text message kind of thing, and I went ahead and did work. If that's not a problem, I'd like to have that incorporated.
Sure.
Okay. If there are no other, yeah, go ahead, Dr. Carmen.
I may, well, I think large office structures or other places where people congregate would be captured by this too. There are a lot of places in the document where it talks about city approval, city as determined by the city. Have we defined who the city is? I mean,
Yeah,
who's
it's
giving all
defined.
these approvals?
It's defined on page
Yeah,
2.
it's top
Is
of
it?
page 2.
Did we do that? Yeah, but who in the city?
May include the city manager or a duly
Okay.
authorized representative.
They'll be published someplace.
Huh?
They'll be published
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What-
who the duly authorized representative of the city is.
Yeah, I think the city decides that. I mean, I think duly authorized is a recognized term, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's why it doesn't specifically say who the city manager would make the duly authorized representative, because there's a few references throughout this ordinance to either the city engineer, the city attorney, and the public works director. So I think it probably depends on the circumstance. I think it's better to leave it vague like that.
Okay. Okay. We'll conclude our comments at this point. Yes?
Just follow up for clarification based on some of the discussion. I think I know the answer, but the section you were talking about with the exemptions, we had a whole,
Right,
starts on page 2,
right.
but the way I'm reading that, if even a single-family residence were to be constructed and they're within 300 feet of the private lateral, there's no exemption that says they're not required to do it. Because it talks about an existing change in use or enlargement or anything else. So, the question about multifamily residence, office building, whatever, if they're within the distance, this says it would apply to me. I'm just trying to make sure that was the, that's the first question.
Okay, to clarify that, it means if you're within 300 feet, whether you're you build a single-family residence or a business or whatever, you have to connect. I think that's understood, that if you're within reach of the sewer system, septic is not the option. You have to connect.
The reason I'm asking is there's all kinds of discussion about other types of buildings. And to me, this says if you're within 300 feet and you don't have an existing one already, you're going to connect.
Yeah, right, okay.
That's correct.
I'm good on that, I'm clear on that, yeah. Okay.
And then the second one, if I understood earlier, we said we were removing all the fees, but on page 11, there's still a formula for industrial waste charges. So I'm not sure if that was intended to be included or not.
It does refer to that, and I think in that current formula, I think it's .08, which I assume means 8 cents. But it just says that, in that formula, is the .08 the current fee number? I went through that, I had the same question myself and satisfied myself that that's what it was. But it also gives the city, it does say that can be increased or decreased, it just, so should it say .08 at all in there? Is that what your question is?
I'm asking, the statement was made earlier, was all the fees have been removed, but there is still a fee for industrial waste charges. I'm trying to make sure that's intended to be there.
Okay.
Yeah, comment was, this is not a fee.
Right.
Okay.
I read that to be the fee calculation methodology, and that the .12 and .08 are just conversion factors or factors, and that the ISS, the waste surcharge in dollars, that is a fee to be set by the city. And then subsection 2 says they review at least annually the basis or methodology for determining charges and shall adjust unit treatment cost in the formula. So I read that to be just a formula and not a fee calculation.
Okay,
Well, I don't disagree.
yeah.
However, V is volume. The left side of that is in dollars, so that stuff in parentheses needs to somehow convert between volume and dollars.
Yeah,
It's not
somehow there's a
defined
rate in there, there's somehow is a rate
There's
in
a
there.
rate in there, so
Yeah.
my question is it intended? If it's intended, that's fine, but it should be clarified what those factors are, so that it's transparent. If it's not intended, then we should remove it.
I think the methodology needs to be in there. I don't know if there should be a footnote saying, you know, in parentheses, rates are for, for example, purposes only. In this formula, Hank, which are the variables, the rates? Is it the .08 and the
Those,
.12?
the .08 and the .12 will be constants,
Okay.
and I suppose.
So
there
those
could
are
be a
ones that
footnote. And
are
I should-
covered by section 2.
I should clarify earlier, when I say rates, I mean retail rates.
Okay.
Associated to how much someone would be paying to, when they get a bill, a wastewater bill, those are pulled from this ordinance. But industrial surcharge, that is still included in here. And no, there is no, doesn't appear to have a footnote for those being constant multipliers or multiplier factors.
No, I agree, though, wouldn't that belong in the fee document that was referenced earlier?
I don't think so. I think the formula is okay in there. I just don't know whether there should be some reference made to the rates used are, for example, are for example purposes only. That gets around it. I mean, that's a pretty intensive formula. I don't know if you want that in a city rates and fee schedule. I mean, it's.
Well, did I understand that the .12 and the .08 are dollars? Yes? Well, or
On the left,
cents,
on the
or-
left is a dollar number. The
Yeah.
unit on the left is
It's a
dollar.
unit of currency, I guess, another way to
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah.
I mean, could we solve this by saying change the .012 to X and the .08 to Y, and then say where X equals whatever it is, and Y is whatever that is intended to be determined, amounts to be determined by the city from time to time, or whatever.
I'm sorry I brought it up.
No,
Well,
They're not dollars, the .12, .08, these are surcharges based upon the chemical demands
Right,
and things like that for the
exactly.
industrial process. So this
Yeah.
is above and beyond the rate. We're not told what those units are, but they have to somehow end up in dollars per
yeah, because everything.
volume unit,
Yeah, yeah.
and convert that milligrams per liter. So they are just constant factors. I don't really have a problem with it. I just want to make sure the intent was to include it here. I don't think there's anything wrong with the formula, because it's just saying if
Yeah.
your application has a higher BOD, you're gonna pay a bigger surcharge, is really
Yeah.
all it's saying.
Yeah. I mean, if you're questioning whether we're locked into a rate because of this, there's an out in section parent 2, which says the city sets these rates.
True.
Okay.
But this isn't a rate, it's a surcharge. So the city's.
Well,
already
okay,
said it's
all right,
volume
yeah,
rate,
okay,
and this
all
is
right.
on top of it based upon the nature of the effluent that's
Okay.
generated.
Um,
So I'm okay with it there. I just wanted to make sure it was intended to be there because of the previous comment
Yeah.
about we weren't going to include any fees. So you're saying yes, it's intended to be there, so I'm fine. That was a point of my question.
Okay.
I do think you have a good point, because if you turn back to Appendix B in the CCMA, there's a surcharge on top of that for BODs. So now you have a surcharge plus a surcharge. And I think that's kind of a hidden surcharge in there. Cause in that last part of there, where you got the table of BODs, if your threshold exceeds that 315 milligrams per liter, then your dollars per pound is 0.11, and that's going back to CCMA. And then you have the city surcharge that's figured off this formula. So there's really two surcharges. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
I don't think I realized that until you just pointed that out.
So,
Okay.
but, so looking down in sub 2 where it talks about unit treatment cost, aren't these factors really the unit treatment cost? One is for BODs and one is for
Suspended salary.
SSs. So, I mean, to kind of get the dollars out of the equation here, is say ISS equals V bracket X times BOD minus 250 plus Y times SS minus 250, where X equals the unit treatment cost for BOD, Y equals the unit treatment cost for suspended solids, and leave it at that. And then 2 says the city shall review annually the basis for determining charges and will adjust the unit treatment costs, plural, in the formula to reflect increases or decreases in the wastewater treatment costs.
Okay. Yeah, that solves it.
But then you're going to two different places to find your fee.
This goes back to what the doctor said in there, like in your definitions part of this, you're talking about total suspended solids and the suspended solids. So your definition then kind of changes a little bit. So I do think this, in my opinion, when you bring this up, it's a good point. You have a surcharge plus another surcharge, and now you have two different definitions of how you're calculating these two different things, but using the same milligrams per liter and then dollars per, what turns out to be dollars per dollars. It's gotta be per pound.
Yeah.
No? Dollars per volume. So you have.
Okay, a comment I'm gonna make is that the people that are gonna be involved in this is not a homeowner. You know?
Yeah.
They're gonna be a company that's gonna have an engineering staff and familiar with industrial discharge. So, I mean, I think if we lay the requirements out, I like Steve's idea, it takes the numbers out of it, by just putting in defined variables. But whether there's a surcharge here or one in Cibolo, if you're putting up a factory, I just believe there's, that, we gotta put ourselves into the feet of those people. They have staff that would be familiar with this and understand that ultimately there's a treatment facility that may have their own surcharges. I mean, I just, it seems to me that would come up in the logical course of somebody building a factory that would be, you know, putting out, you know, stuff that's subject to surcharges and things like that. It'd be a pretty serious operation.
But I gotta go back to, if you have a document that establishes the fees for your wastewater, which is separate from this document, because we're not gonna discuss fees in this one. We're gonna have a separate one set up. Why would you go to two different documents to determine your fee when it should all be in one place?
We can pull 5.10 from this.
I mean, that's really what you're talking about, is you just have to take that whole section out of there and then, and put it in whatever ordinance you're gonna have for rates and fees. That works too.
Gets it totally out of here.
I,
I think it's 3 documents.
If you leave it here?
If you leave it, if the surcharge calculated in pounds in CCMA, and you calculate it in volume in this portion of it, and then you have a portion that's in the fees portion of it in your public works, now you have, I'm saying you got 3 places to figure out your total fee.
Yeah, then I think it all needs to be put in one fee document and not
I-
separated.
I agree with you. I like the idea of pulling it out of here and putting it into your fee document altogether.
one of the things, I mean, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that this document is to harmonize with Cibolo and Schertz, who are gonna be the transporter of Garden Ridge's waste down to Cibolo. How much does this complicate that? Either that, or under monthly sewer charge, or just put 3.06 back in, which is monthly sewer charge requirements and fees, is to say, fees are covered elsewhere unless referenced here. That allows you to leave the formula in there with variables. It doesn't hide from the fact that the document does address fees from a formulary standpoint. I mean, I'm, is that an acceptable option? I mean, I think somebody who's gonna hook up needs to be aware that there's surcharges in the system and shouldn't have to go to a city rate and fee schedule to find it. That's part of hooking up to a sewer system, is understanding that there's requirements associated with heavy effluents, large effluents and stuff like that. So I guess I'm gonna take a position as leave it in, and then in 3.06, where we took use charges out, it's in, you know, it's right after street repair deposits, where we talk about generically having to pay and put deposits down to repair a street. This 3.06 would reference fees are specified elsewhere. I'm not sure I've got the right words here.
In another ordinance to that, something to that effect.
Except in formulary here, and maybe even make reference to that.
These will be a lot easier to follow once we have the digital municipal code up. It's kind of difficult.
I'm sorry.
Once we have the digital municipal code, this will all be searchable and not in separate documents.
Okay.
and that type of
Okay.
thing, but in the meantime.
I mean, how would the city like to see this? I mean, it isn't a requirement, it's gotta be there. It seems to me putting a complicated formula like that in a rate and fee schedule is not appropriate. That's a punch chart that you look at. This is an explanation of what you do if you discharge excess amounts of waste. I guess I'd like to propose bringing 3.06 back and make reference that the charge requirements are in other ordinances. Any fees referenced herein are for formula purposes only.
I don't even know what that means, though. So help me understand one more time. Who's going to pay the surcharge? So if they connect to our sewer system, the effluent is flowing from our system into the Cibolo system, wouldn't Cibolo be charging us the fee for that effluent? I mean, how are they going to know what to charge the individual industrial user, or is that going to be a separate agreement that I'm not understanding?
CCMA would set up, through the individual permitting process, they would set up a pre-treatment agreement directly with the with the user.
So
So that's how
they're-
they would get their rate set up, is through a separate agreement through them.
So
And
if
this-
they're going to do that and they're gonna have a separate agreement, is this formula we're all talking about part of that agreement? I mean, what is the purpose of that formula? Would it be better to just say there will be a separate agreement in this ordinance and leave it out altogether? Or is that essential?
We can, however, we can have our own surcharge should they have an excessive deal. So if it's in our system, then we're coming to them for a surcharge independently.
Well, I know we can do it, but before this gets approved, I think we need to know what we intend to do. So is the intent to have a second layer of surcharge that we need to cover here? Or is it going to be something that is suitable for the overall rate document? The more we're talking about this, the less I understand it.
Yeah, let me try and cast this. There's a factory out there that's
I
discharging.
do understand. I'm trying to hear from these guys, because
And the issue
what
is,
I'm sensing
are we
here.
double charging for essentially the, I mean, Cibolo has a process. You're a high discharger, you pay a surcharge for it, according to a formula. Your question is there a formula that, is our system impacted by that to the point where a fee is appropriate?
At this point, it's not a question. My
Okay.
statement is, if I'm from the outside trying to work this process, you have now confused me about the intent of the process to the point at which I wonder if it's transparent. All I need to know is, who do I talk to? Do I need my separate pretreatment agreement with the Cibolo Authority? Then tell me to do that. And tell me it's incorporated in the permitting process. If we're gonna have a separate Garden Ridge fee structure, tell me that. Tell me where to go look. But having three different things that have different definitions in one document, I think creates the potential impression that the city doesn't know what they're doing for a user like this. And what I am sensing is a desire to just get this out, and I'm more concerned about causing a problem. So,
Fair enough.
so I'm hoping the city can explain, okay, exactly what is the intent, and then we can decide, well, does it say that? But right now, I'm feeling a little bit confused, and I wasn't when this started, but I am now.
From what I understand is the intent would be to basically double charge them. That's correct. So if that's not the route we want to go, then they would just go directly to, if we wanted to take out 310, then they would go directly to CCMA and have their own separate agreement, so we're not double dipping there.
How do Shirts do this? I mean, this agreement, I've read the Shirts one, I can't remember what's in there specifically regarding this, but they, I'm sure, have some surcharge dischargers in their system that goes to Cibolo.
This was likely pulled from Shirts, but I have to confirm. I'm not sitting in front of it yet.
Yeah, if the
I wish I had the Shirts one.
end treater is Cibolo, then they're the ones that set the fees, and we don't have to mess with tracking a dozen or more different little entities along the way. It's supposed to be turned off. So just leave it to Cibolo to make determinations on what they're going to treat and what it takes to treat it and what the consequences are. And leave it at that.
Ryan, can you offer any thoughts on this? I don't know, from your experience, I mean, this is a valid point that's coming up. And yes, I'd like to get this done, but this isn't, I think the other comments I think we're able to address.
Yeah, I mean, again,
This is an important one, I agree.
if it's something we need to look at from Schertz's standpoint, again, we're trying to utilize a similar ordinance, Schertz, being that we're going to connect with them. So that was sort of the intent of why we were doing this. From that standpoint, industrial and being a surcharge, I mean, we have to look in that a little bit more. I think they're probably heavy on that because Schertz has a large area for industrial, so does Cibolo. And that's probably why it's written in there.
Okay.
But how both of those entities charge related to that, that's something we need to look at because it could be vastly different from Garden Ridge because we're not heavy on the industrial.
Yeah.
So it's just,
Okay.
it's more of a clarifying from that standpoint because again, I have to say that there's sections of industrial, and a large part is just down 3009 for Schertz. But we're trying to, again, connect to their system and try to follow what their process is through utilizing a similar ordinance in this case.
Yeah,
But our focus, again, is gonna be mostly commercial related to development on 2252.
and this is section 90-91 in the Schertz Municipal Code.
That it's handled basically the same way?
This was pulled from that,
Yeah.
from section 90-1. That's basically word for word.
Okay.
But if we're talking about a point of discharge along the sewer line for each individual industry, and we have to, gonna have to set up two separate monitoring systems, or we'll have one monitoring system and we'll charge the client based on that, and Cibolo or Schertz will also charge the client based on that. So they're in essence being charged twice. And is that gonna make us more competitive or less competitive?
So I believe as it's written, is that city shall review at least annually on the basis of determining charges and shall adjust the cost formula to reflect increases or decreases. So I'll have to look a little deeper into it, but it looks like it gives the authority to charge should we see the need. Now, we could look at this in the agreement with Schertz and see if they're going to require some sort of pass-through charge as this runs through theirs, and see if we need to accommodate for that when we're going for our rates. So that's how I could see this being something where we would want to keep it in there, because Schertz is going to demand that charge to go through theirs, to go through their system to get to CCMA. So that's kind of something I think we should clarify with them. If that's something they're charging to industrial users and we're upstream and we're connecting and going directly through their piece, then I could see a case for keeping this in there and allowing us to determine should a rate come, and that may just be the exact rate that Schertz would charge Garden Ridge, ergo them, and we're going to be just the stewards passing that along to Schertz for their surcharge. But that's how their current ordinance is written, so they have a process here for determining, and they set certain rates for industrial users. What I am not clear on is if they're doubly charging or if they're just referencing CCMAs, and that's kind of, I think, what we need to get clear from them. And if they're saying, oh, no, we don't charge them separately, we just give it to CCMA, then I think the answer is, well, why do we have this in here? We're directing them to the individual permit, which is monitored by CCMA. Therefore, let's not get into all of these weeds. CCMA is already managing that. They have a pretreatment agreement with them. Let's allow them to manage as is. But if there's some sort of charge that we're going to get from Schertz saying, hey, you're pushing this industrial user through here, then I think we do need to keep that in there and reflect the intent that they have, so we have a mechanism to pass on that fee.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to suggest, I don't know that we're in a position to move this forward with a recommendation to city council, because this is an important issue because it interfaces possibly with Schertz. Are there any other comments? If not, I'm going to suggest we move to the next topic, and then to the city engineer, then the other comments that we've provided, if you're able to address those. And we'll take a run at this next session, okay? Yeah, yes, Ryan.
No, we're just talking to Marissa because we had obviously You know, it's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
as a placeholder for the August agenda, and we
Right.
need a public hearing and all
Right.
that, so we can take up this item next month, and then since we needed to schedule the public hearing out in advance of so many days for
Yeah.
this will be the September meeting, so we do have the agreement with Shirts on the agenda for the August meeting, so.
Okay.
so-
But is that predicated on this wastewater ordinance being done? Okay.
No, not necessarily.
Okay. I mean, I think this is a, you know, like you said, we waded into it and kind of looked at it. I think there's a reasonable question there. I mean, let's make it clear. We want something that allows things, so to speak, to flow smoothly from here to Shirts. And the issue of where these fees come out is a very valid point. And I don't think we have the expertise here and the references, and it may even require a conversation with Shirts on this particular point. I think everything else is pretty well, we pretty well hammered it out.
The Shirts agreement, we're trying to get done to show that we've established that partnership for connectivity for the potential private development on 2252 that needs to be in place. However, if we're able to come to an agreement with the development at 2252 and 3009 down the road, it's going to take them time to do the construction. We're going to have to go underneath the railroad track. We've already started that process with Union Pacific. So tying these things together in the next 12 months is going to be key, but we definitely want to have an ordinance in place when we start actually having users that are utilizing the line that's connected to Shirts. And then at that
Right.
point, we'll, as we discussed last meeting, we're going to have to at some point set up a rate because we're going to have to pay Shirts for the connectivity piece.
Right.
And we need to make sure that we're, as Hank said, meeting dollar for dollar. If not, the city could
Right.
collect a little bit more from that standpoint.
So we need to continue to move forward and try and finalize, but we're not pacing anything in terms of that interconnect discussion or anything. And I think this is an important one. I mean, the odds of us having somebody that falls in this category are probably pretty small, but if we're gonna put it in there, we probably wanna take a moment and make sure it's right, and appreciate your comments, Kevin, you're right.
I think it's a valid concern, and
Yeah.
we can look
Okay.
into what that process is, and if we understand the process, then we can understand the intent, and then where does this fit into everything is.
And I guess I'm gonna suggest if the recommendation, it comes back in draft form with this still in there, because it makes sense to have it in there and it's consistent, to take the numbers out, because that is a separate comment about we weren't gonna have any fees in here, but replace those numbers with variables.
X and Y, correct.
And
I
then
have that written
that can
down.
be in a fee schedule.
I think that's very reasonable, yes.
Okay. Move on? Okay. Item 5, the FY '27 proposed budget and water rates. I'm going to let the city manager address this for a couple of minutes, and then I have a couple of comments.
Sure. Commissioners, as we discussed last month, it was a proposed budget. This is essentially the final, what will be a part of the proposed budget. Again, I wanted to bring it in front of y'all to review and actually see. We've gone over this last month and looking at the actual water fund itself. If you could tell, we have, in the personnel services, we have off to the side, there's a comment there at 3% in department modifications. We're doing some restructuring of our public works department and water utilities, so that's encompassing an increase in salaries. As we talked about, there's increases in subscription services, and then the purchase of lawnmower, handheld radios, continuous chlorine monitor, municipal well site. And then we still have the interconnect project with Vista Ridge tied in there under capital. And then at the bottom line, we have 9-month reserve. So nothing really has changed from last month to this month, other than this is the final proposed budget that will accompany the general fund when I file the budget to city council on July 30th. And then I have here as, and water rates is because the rate that's programmed into this proposed budget for the operation of the water fund is the same rate as last year. And then, I won't steal the chairman's thunder, but I know he wants to elaborate on a few things. We had a kickoff meeting with the consultants for the water rate study. We went through, a few questions they had, and as we go through the process, we're gonna work to establish a rate for FY '28 that would be the budget for FY '28, October 1st, 2027. So our target is to bring forward in October, what the model's gonna look like for the next 5 years for y'all to review, approve, bring it to city council, and then we start that process next year with the budget to incorporate what the water rate is recommended at that point, so. Chairman, Chairman Pohl was in the meeting with us, this afternoon with the consultants.
On this, but I thought this might add some dimension to it. We had a kickoff phone call with New Gen Strategies, which is, we've talked about this before. They're a consulting company, strong in the financial side of water rate setting and so on. And a lot of things were discussed, but I think the things that were important is that the goals of this are to create a 5-year rate outlook. So in other words, rather than sort of leaping from year to year and deciding what our rate's gonna be, we've got a roadmap not only for the Water Commission, but for the City Council and for the citizens to explain why our rate structure is moving in the direction it is. The goals are to fund operations, service the debt obligations, particularly those that are generated as the city moves forward with the action items that are in the capital improvement plan, and do it in a manner that maintains a good bond rating status, which affects the cost of the money. Provide information that also can help the city develop water development board grants, and there is some of that activity going on now. But they have a lot, their expertise is not so much the technical side of any of this, but the financial side of it. And I thought this is where they could bring some value to us. And then, like I said, provide a roadmap to us, to the city council and the community that looks more than just ahead at the end of our nose 1 year at a time. Because the elephant in the living room is the capital budget. And if we're gonna exercise that, it's gonna be a combination of debt financing, most likely water rates and so on. So I was pleased to join in on that. There has been a lot of exchange of information. They have the capital improvement plan. They have certain budgetary information that's ready at this point. A lot of discussions with Robin, our controller, about things. And the goal is to have this a presentation, something that we can look at for our October meeting. And we'll just play it out from then. I suspect there'll be some various scenarios. So that's the roadmap that's laid out right now.
Chairman, I forgot to mention on the line item there, we had plugged in, just as we did this year under the water for the professional services, the water rate analysis, the 35,000. So, in this current budget is the 30,000 we plugged in for the New Gen for the water rate. That next year is to have them look at a combination of wastewater and impact fees for us moving forward. I believe so, right? Okay, that's what they'll provide for us next, is the second phase at that cost for wastewater rates and impact fees moving forward, to do an impact study.
Just so everyone's on the same page, you said October meeting. The commission will not have an October meeting, just like y'all haven't in years past due to voting in here. So don't plan anything for an October water commission meeting.
Okay.
We will target November. They'll probably be happy about that, but giving them an extra
Okay.
month.
All right. Well, it was October a couple hours ago, so it'll be November now. Okay. Questions on this? Discussion?
I just got a quick question under that professional services. You don't usually see a 5-digit decrease in there, but you got $14,000 decrease from 26 to 27 on professional services. What was that?
Anything else? Okay. The next steps, I mean, you saw my conclusion. I mean, following heavy rain,
Stephen, I thought in the past, water usage dropped when we had significant rain events. The past being by 2 or 3 years ago at least, but I thought we saw more water usage drop in the past.
Yeah, we've noticed that we'd have less water usage. You drive around, you don't see as many irrigation systems running during rain or several hours after that. Was Sundays also included in the?
No, I locked on to Tuesdays and Saturdays because they were in the April to June period were the times where there was a significant rainfall event. I didn't look at it.
Okay. Well, if you saw Sundays, they're normally pretty low also. I didn't know if any Sundays were put into this or not.
No, I did not because going through the data, there was no rainfall time to go on a Sunday.
But I guess, also, it could be also that, on particular rainfall days, some of the zones that are in the city are, have more irrigation going on or whatever that particular day or whatever. They're not all equally spaced out on how many houses per area or per day. So that could also have an effect on it too, I would imagine. But just by visually driving around and whatnot during rain and after rain, you don't really see too much going on. You don't see the tanks just dropping like if it was like a week of 100 degrees.
I guess what I was surprised by, it is depressed the day following a heavy rain, but it bounces back so quickly. And that I would have expected to see maybe for the next few days to stay low, because it would be other addresses using it. My concern is people have been so used to just setting their system in the last couple of years and letting it rip, on their water night, that the rain sensors, they may be disabled, maybe don't work anymore, or that people have just forgotten they've got a controller and they can determine the destiny. So I'm sort of asking for feedback. You all have irrigation systems. I don't know where the mental state of all of you are at. If this is something that's even worth putting more time in on, because it is an opportunity, to share with our residents an education about water usage.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that the systems are on autopilot, and they get them programmed going first of the season, and as they say, set it and forget it, regardless of a rain, particularly if the rain is not on their day to water. So, one thought.
So just to add a little context, I mean, I think any data is worth looking at, so I don't want to imply that it's not. From previous water rate studies, though, the non-residential use average was somewhere around 7,000 gallons, up to 9-ish, but like I said, it depends on the size of the family. But that's pretty consistent for 3,000 for two, 6,000 for a family of 4. That's pretty consistent. The other thing is, and Councilmember Mueller did this while he was chair, there's a far bigger impact on temperature than there is on rain. So that's part of it. I think in the spring months, people come out of the non-irrigation season, they're making sure everything works, and they're just getting ahead of it, to be honest with you. So I'll be interested to see what happens in July. But the other thing, the way our drought reduction or demand reduction stuff works, I think you're correct. It has a lot to do with the fact that people have one day to water in this stage.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of how much do I believe the weather forecast. It rained 2 days ago, but I can't trust that it might not do it again for the next week. So we sort of incentivize continuing to water. So I would offer that maybe we ought to look at, it's not our decision, but being in a significant demand reduction stage longer than needed may actually create the incentive to use water when it's your watering day. But the other thing is just, it is habit. I mean, I don't think the rain sensors first of all, they fail frequently and you don't know they failed. And secondly, I don't think they really suppress it for very long. They keep it from working when it's raining. But I'm sure there's different types out there. But I drive, I know, to Stephen's point, I drive around and I see a lot of the HOAs are watering their green spaces while it is actively raining. I mean, it doesn't even seem to faze them. So that's not a residence. But there's a lot, I think there is a room for some education in there. But I think we need a lot more data before we know.
Power outage, and then, but I don't think a lot of people know about that portion of it.
I'll also add that y'all think about these things, but from working here for so long, my experience is that our average resident does not think about this. And when we first went into this stage, for example, and we gave at least over a year leeway before we even started issuing warnings, much less citations, when the citations came around, everyone was freaking out, and we realized none of them knew how to work their systems. So then they come and ask us how to work their systems. Well, we don't know. We can't tell them. So that's when we realized a lot of people don't even know they have something, or they don't know how to work it, or they had to get somebody professional to come out and program it for them. And so they're probably too scared to even touch it now. So I know to y'all it seems like it's something you'd be thinking about, but I think for our average resident, they likely don't, it doesn't cross their mind about when their sprinklers are going on and off.
I would like to also add that the notification system works and tells them when they're excessively watering and such, but a lot of times they ignore that as well. So even though we might have a notification to them to, you know, stop the watering because we're in the stage 2, they do continue to water, and they continue to get the restriction notice over and over and over again. So it's just a matter of, you know, them paying attention and actually following what it's telling them to do, you know, so, and we can't really control it, not from our end.
Well, thank you for your input. I mean, you see it on the street every day, and meeting's gone long enough here. As an action item, it'll be interesting to crunch July's data, because we had a lot of rain, and see what impact that'll be. Just as I was finishing that up, that data was becoming available. So we'll keep it on the agenda and review it, and then ask that the city might think if, you know, if there's appropriate opportunities where we might provide some education, assuming that we don't plunge back into drought. But the pattern seems to be changing a little bit anyway. So thanks, appreciate your input. And that brings us to future agenda items. Wastewater management, wastewater ordinance, and conservation. Any other items at this point that the commissioners would like to see on the agenda? Okay. Second citizen comment period, item 5. Have anybody? Okay. That concludes all the items on the agenda. The meeting is adjourned at 7:35. Well, that, I think, kind of at the end sort of crept out, didn't it? Yeah.
We need to get some consistency of shirts.